Thank you for joining the podcast for Beyond the Banter. Before we get started, you need to know some important information. If you need support immediately, please reach out to one of the following organisations. Lifeline on 131114, Beyond Blue on 1300224636, or Men's Line Australia on 1300 789 978. If your life is in danger, please call 000 immediately.
Beyond the banter, beyond the banter, we'll find the answer. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Banter. A few things have changed. A new year, 2025. We said a few times last year that we really wanted to elevate the podcast, change things up, get it a little bit more intimate, a bit more scenery. You'll see that's a big step up from last year. And we'll go into it a little bit later, but a new face for the podcast as well. But look, today it's a very interesting story. I have heard it from Nick, so I'm very keen to see how this sort of comes out and the information that's shared, and I'm sure there's bits I don't know about, so it's sort of going to catch me a little bit offside as well. But for people that don't know Nick, I met Nick probably about 18 months ago, I'd say, through Jazz. Just by chance, I think you heard what we were doing. You spoke to Jazz, and then one thing led to another. Yeah. And I was sleeping at your house, head to toe with you, while we do this podcast, you know. So it's gone very quick. But
there was 18 months in between that.
Yeah, there's a couple of dates, I guess. There were a couple of dates. Those flowers were nice you kept sending. But no, and it leads us to where we are now. And the idea about this whole, the thing about this whole idea with Beyond the Banter is to find everyday guys out there in the jungle doing their own thing. Men that are suffering, I guess, in silence, feeling that the stigma around mental health is still so strong that you can't actually come out and have a chat and talk to your fellow mate. Talking to Nick, it's a hell of a story. I'll let you do that part when we get there. But I've just been blown away by, I guess, Nick's... I'll say that the first word that comes to mind, professionalism, with the whole thing. We've come a long way, all jokes aside, and I'm so proud to be sitting here doing this podcast with you. I've had the pleasure of watching one of your shows. You did the gig for Beyond the Banter, and look, you've really cemented your spot within the organisation, and we're so happy to have you on board. For people that don't know Nick, he's a comedian here based in Melbourne. I'll let you do your own little intro there. Very funny.
I'll talk myself up too much.
Talk yourself up. Don't listen to what people say about him on the forums or, what people say about him in general. He's actually a really good guy. But look, this is really important because, and as this story goes on, it goes to show that, especially, and I'm going to say this a few times throughout this whole podcast, but being a comedian, getting on stage and providing humour and laughter, and I've said it to you a few times, medicine, really, for people that are 100%. Struggling.
Yeah.
For me, that's a natural way to get those endorphins up and get that feel-good chemicals happening in your body. And you're up there doing it, but there's also another side to it where you're struggling and you are going through day-to-day strains on life and 100%. Health and being a dad and all that sort of stuff. So it's going to be very interesting to hear your story and how you've become so successful in the comedian scene in Melbourne, not in Melbourne, but you've been around the world with it. So, look, I think I've talked you up enough. Before we get in today's podcast, we will ask for you to give us a like on the podcast that you're listening to, give us a comment we do this because we want to provide a voice for people that I guess haven't found their voice.
Yeah.
The best way that the community can show us that they're engaged and they want this to continue is by showing us a love. So on the podcast platforms, if you can give us a like, social media, we're on all the major social media platforms. So just give us a comment, give us a little like, and yeah, that will go a long way to helping us grow beyond the banter, 2025 and beyond. So we'll get straight into it. We are here for a whole weekend. I'm down in Nick's house. He's done this amazing job getting this studio happening. Toph will be jealous because this has just elevated the whole thing.
More so with the sleeping arrangements he might be jealous with.
Yeah, the head to toe. We've had dinner tonight, brisket, enough said. It was amazing.
Yeah, we went to the Bearded Pig for the first time. So
yeah.
To share that experience. But, mate, I just want to say, first up, thank you for letting me be part of Beyond the Banter. You did say that I met through Jazz. I was getting my dog groomed through Jazz, actually. We met through TikTok, found out she was a dog groomer, getting my dog groomed, and she said, hey, I've got this guy, Chris, coming down. And I really had no idea what she was talking about. But through some of my struggles, I've always wanted to give back a little bit. And I guess it's what I've always wanted to do through life. So I'm also a massage therapist as well. I've had my business for 11 years where I am now, but I've been doing massage for 15 years. And when I first started, I was working and I was constantly just thinking, how can I give this back to other people? And then I had this client in and I said to her, what are you doing for the rest of the day? And she said, oh, well, I'm actually going and we prepared dinner for the homeless at the multicultural hub in the city. And I was like, well, that's amazing. Do you reckon you could put me on to the person who runs the whole show? And so what I did was I rented a room in the multicultural hub next to the kitchen area. And so I'd take my portable table in there and we'd have a whiteboard. And so basically I was massaging the homeless while they were eating and just trying to give back because I had all these people coming in with back problems and everything saying, I woke up sore. And I'm thinking, you're waking up on a really nice mattress while there's someone sleeping rough.
Yep.
And that was a way that I could give back. So with my comedy and everything that I'm doing as well, I'm constantly looking for ways that I can give back. And when Jazz told me about the organisation at the time and now that it's become a charity and that I've been there basically from the grassroots, hanging on by a thread.
Yeah.
But it's something that I feel very passionate about because I do have a story. I like to try and push my story out so that I can inspire others. And like you said, that's what we're doing with this podcast. So, like Chris said, if you can like and subscribe to the YouTube channel as well, that will give us a huge help because we want to put our message out there and other people's message so that people don't feel alone. So help us not to feel alone on the YouTube page. Yeah. Give us a follow.
Yeah.
And mate, I just really appreciate you allowing me to be part of this.
Likewise. It's funny you mention it because when we were first talking and it was coming, I think it might have been even 3 months where we probably hadn't even spoken. And I mean, Jazz might have messaged and said, hey, you haven't spoken to Nick for 3 months. What's going on? I said, nothing's changed from our end. Everything's just slow burning, and now look where we are. It's a big part. And I should also say that you put on the event for Beyond the Banter late last year, and that provided some breathing room for us financially to be able to go out and do some stuff. There's some new merch coming, and general just getting everyone together from Beyond the Banter, you'd be able to provide that, and that's why me and Toph are just so happy to have you on board. Yeah. It brings a new a level to the podcast. It will change things up a little bit. Toph is still there, floating around, doing all the editing, all the fun stuff. But, we sort of want to change it up a little bit. And, I'm really looking forward to the next couple of days. Tonight is about yourself.
Yes.
As I said at the start of the podcast, I know a little bit about the story. Yeah. I'm lucky enough to know a little bit about the story, and I'm still blown away by how you're determined to get to the bottom of everything. And just being here today and watching, and you're in pain of a few little bits and pieces, and the determination, the smiles, the jokes, the laughter, it hasn't stopped all day. I haven't seen you once complain all day.
Yeah.
So, look, mate, I want to throw it over to you.
Thank you.
I will say just before we do start that everything we do on the podcast, everything we do via the website, we aren't trained health professionals. I have to stress that. Very importantly, we're not. This is about everyday life-to-life situations lived through people that come on the podcast. So if you are feeling, a little bit down, or you need some help, please reach out to the relevant telephone numbers, which can be found on the website, obviously Lifeline, or if you are feeling really down, then just head up to the hospital and get checked out. We will also say that some of the conversation tonight will be a little bit triggering, so take your time with it, and if you need to take breaks, please do. So with all that said, mate, I've been looking forward to this for a very long time.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw it over to you first. I'm going to
you.
let you, go through a few things.
Yeah.
And then, like everything, we'll start and pick apart some of the story to try and get a little bit more clear information, and more importantly, how you've got to where you are today and the help that you've had along the way.
Yeah, fantastic.
So, over to you, mate.
Thanks, mate. Well, look, I'll start off as I did say, I have my own business, massage therapist. Everything that I've done with life, I've gone in just head on. I don't really, stop to think about consequences or anything like that. So I took massive gambles on taking on my business, but at that point in my life and in my early 20s, I took massive gambles every day. I was a big drinker, partying hard, doing all the things that everyone loves doing when they're that age. And I want to stress that because I wasn't scared to unalive myself, basically, because I was just living so hard. I was working hard, plus I was living hard. And, I want that fear that fear that I didn't have is going to come back into the fear that I have now. Because what happens is, I think that when people are quite successful in their lives, what tends to happen is an event might happen that might break that. And that's exactly what happened to me. So everything was going quite well. I'd actually just redone my kitchen with a friend of mine. I was ripping out these granite bench tops and I'd injured my lower back. I had a client of mine at the time that had gone and got PRP injections into his lower back. And I didn't know too much about him. Obviously, being in the industry, I'd heard about it, but didn't know too much. But what they do is they actually take out your blood and they put it through this machine that separates the healthy platelets, and then they inject it back into the area. And that's supposed to promote the healing process and speed it up a little bit.
Is this the sort of stuff you hear about athletes that
100%?
This is a normal practice for them with knees and
so normal practice. So it's not crazy. It's not out there. It's newer sort of medicine, but I was getting it in my lower back. And just the doctor who did, I won't call him a doctor, the guy who did it, he basically took my blood work and just said, look, we're just going to run through your bloods and just see everything and just see how you're going. And at the time, I was actually feeling probably my fittest. I was gymming all the time. I'd been doing kickboxing. I'd really been quite athletic and healthy all my life. Plus, massage is a very physical job. And so it was a Sunday night when I got a video call from him at about 8:30 at night. And I remember going into the study and putting on this video call, and I thought he might have told me that my vitamin D levels were low or something like that. That's what I'd braced myself for. When he was starting to run through those levels and testosterone and everything, he's going, everything's pretty good here. But I could tell there was a hesitation in his voice, and I knew that there was something up that he was getting to, that he was sort of holding off for a little while. And then out of nowhere, he just said, what concerns me is your red blood cells. He said, your hemoglobin levels are at 185 and they shouldn't be 180. He said, basically, your red blood cells, because they're so high, he goes, I believe you've got this rare blood cancer and I'm worried you're going to have a heart attack or a stroke overnight. He goes, what I want you to do is drink as much water as you can tonight. Don't sleep. Take aspirin and just get yourself in first thing in the morning, because what we're going to do is we're going to drain a bag of your blood, which will then bring that red blood cell count down, and then we'll send you off to the hematologist and get these results. But the way he was telling me and delivering it to me, he was excited that he'd found this thing. He was rubbing his hands together that he'd created, that he'd found this blood cancer that I had. And in his mind, he was adamant that I had it. And as I said to you, I felt so fit and healthy at the time that I just can't even comprehend that stuff was happening.
Any issues with your blood cells prior?
Never had an issue.
No family.
Never had
no history.
blood pressure issues.
Yep.
Never had anything. Never had family issues or anything like that. So it was just so out of nowhere. I'd never heard of this. It was polycythemia, which is the blood cancer. Never heard of it before. And the only words I really heard that night was the main one, heart attack, and stroke.
Yep.
And I remember so the next morning I was supposed to go and have some scans done. So I was having some CT scans on my legs, and then I was going into his clinic. And I remember getting to the CT scans, and I actually felt like I was going to pass out. And so when you're in that moment and you've been told that you've got this illness, and all of a sudden you start getting these symptoms, those symptoms then become the illness. You feel that is the illness. And so I basically cancelled the scans, and then we just drove straight from that place to his clinic so that I could drain a bag of my blood. Now, when I got onto the table, they hooked me up to the drip, and they started to proceed to take a bag of my blood. Now, what happened when they did that, I could actually feel, like from the back of my head, this pressure release as the blood was coming out. And so it cemented for me that obviously there was an issue, because I felt this euphoric feeling when that blood was getting drained. There was this sense of like calmness, relaxing. A lot of that tension that was in my body was releasing. And after he did it, I did notice that there was a difference within myself. So once again, all these things just cementing that there was something wrong. What he then did was call the hematologist while I was in the office, asked what samples he needed to take for testing and to send them off. And then I was to then go see this hematologist, who was a professor of hematology as well. So I was going in to see one of the top hematologists, which you would think you'd be confident with seeing someone like that.
Yeah, for sure.
So I did about 8 months worth of testing with the hematologist before we got the full results. But just before we get to that, about 2 days later, I was doing a gig. It was in South Melbourne, and I wanted to push myself. And everyone around me at the time was telling me not to do it. You know, just stay home, just focus on your health at the minute. And I thought, honestly, that at that point that I'm probably dying. Sorry, Toasty just jumped up on the table. This is Toasty.
This is the mascot.
This is the mascot. So I thought at that point that I was at high risk of a heart attack or something like that. But what I didn't want to do was show my son that I'd give up on my goals. So I'm like, if this is all I can be with my son, is an open mic comedian, performing for free, at least if I was to pass away, I was doing what I believed and showing him to always chase your goals in life, no matter what obstacles are put in front of you. So after the show, I was driving home and I was stuck behind a tram, and I'm trying to get past. I'd had very little to eat that night. And so I started getting a little bit agitated. And I've never had an unhealthy balance of anxiety in my life. I've always probably had a healthy balance when you've got a business and stressful life. But as I was driving, I had an Apple Watch on, and my Apple Watch alerted me that my heart rate had elevated to about 180 beats per minute, and to slow down, you know, and to relax, because it could tell that I wasn't running or anything like that, obviously, and that my heart rate was going up too fast.
It's telling you there's a problem.
There's a problem. And so that triggered me more. I started to feel my heart actually pounding out of my chest. I couldn't feel my hands and feet, and I had this rush going up the back of my neck. I pulled my car over, and I instantly just thought, this is the heart attack that doctor told me that I could possibly have.
Yeah,
it's coming now. Yeah. And so I called an ambulance, and I called my wife and basically said, you know, I'm done. I'm dying. And it took quite a long time for the ambulance to come to where, it felt like an eternity. I don't really know how long it took. But when they got there, I literally jumped out of my car and ran to them and told them, you know, basically, I'm having a heart attack. I've been told that I've got this rare blood cancer, and all you have to do is make me live for my son. I said, my son's 3 years old. Just whatever you do, make me live for my son. I don't care about anything else. And they were actually really good.
Yep.
Absolutely amazing paramedics.
Yep.
We were sat in the ambulance for quite some time. They had me hooked up to the ECGs, running all the stuff. And I said to them again, like, look, I need to get to the hospital. Like, I'm having a heart attack. And they were like, Nick, if you're having a heart attack, we would have already had you at the hospital.
Yeah.
They could tell that I was having an anxiety attack.
Yep.
And as I said, I've never had one before. And I'd been around mates growing up, and we're going to get to meet some of them over this weekend as well, who have suffered with anxiety, and I've been there and witnessed them. But until you've had one yourself, you just don't understand how real it feels to the fact that you might be dying.
Yeah. I wouldn't wish it upon my worst enemy.
There's nothing that, no way.
Yeah,
No.
it is that bad. And I knew a lot of that story, and there's bits there I didn't know about. I guess hearing that story again tonight, the moment the doctor rang and said, hey, this could happen at any second, you need to not sleep tonight and drink water. The next morning you went in and got the blood taken out.
Yeah.
Was the blood that was getting taken out, would that have minimised the risk of a heart attack happening or a stroke happening?
Yeah.
That was the purpose of taking the blood.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. So you went in there, it's out, so this isn't going to affect me because I've gone in and...
See, I don't think...
Is that where your head was at?
No,
I'm trying to understand.
No, there was never... So from that point on, up until today, I'm constantly in fear that I'm dying of a heart attack.
Yeah.
So even though he drained the blood, like, still didn't understand it all. I know that what they're trying to do is that if the red blood cells are really high, the blood's quite thick, and it's trying to make its way through the arteries and everything like that, and it's going to get jammed, and it's then going to cause pressure and clog up, and that's where you could have a heart attack or a stroke. So the idea of bringing that blood, taking that blood out, is you're bringing that levels back to a reasonable level for the body, the pressure in the body.
And medication straight away, I'd assume, blood thinners or anything like
blood
that?
thinners, well, aspirin.
Aspirin.
That was the only thing that I was on at that point. Now, so I didn't wind up in hospital from that time.
So what happened? So the paramedics came because this is a really important part of anyone that may have an anxiety attack for the first time, and you think, the worst case scenario, because that's what the anxiety does. Before we move on to the next part, tell us about that engagement with the paramedics.
Yeah.
Just a little bit, just to go over what was happening.
So as I said, like, looking back on them, they were absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
You can't ever criticise how good the paramedics are here in Australia.
Yep.
Their level of care. There was a man and a lady, and they both comforted me so much. They took me into the hospital, and then there was probably a couple of hours wait while I was waiting to get a bed in the hospital.
So emergency ward, yeah.
And one of the ladies stood by my side the whole time.
Yeah,
Didn't leave my side the whole time.
The paramedic?
The paramedic.
Yeah, right.
I believe at that stage they might have given me some Valium or something like that to help me relax.
Yep.
But really it was just waiting to get that bed.
Yep.
Once I got into the hospital, and they hooked me up to all the machines, all the devices, then you do get a somewhat of a relief. But one thing that I didn't realise until that point about an anxiety attack is that there's spikes. And so once you then your body starts to come down from that anxiety, you'll be in that sort of rested state, and then it will just trigger again. And you'll sort of go like that for a day or two afterwards. It can go for.
Yep.
And one thing that a lot of people don't realise is that then there becomes the fear of having an anxiety attack. So once I got the all clear from the hospital and everything is okay, for someone, and I'm going to say that I'm diagnosed with medical anxiety now.
Yep.
But when you go through that testing with someone who's a professional like that, you do get a short-term amount of relief.
Yeah.
So even though they might be able to give you the all clear, your heart's fine, everything's running fine, you then still feel like maybe a month or so later, you might find that you'll come back to then feeling anxious again. So it's only a short-term fix, getting that reassurance from the doctors.
That short-term fix for some people might only last a minute.
It could
2
be.
minutes, 30 seconds. They walk out of the hospital, they've all been cleared, everything's good, everything's good. They walk out the door, bang, it happens again.
Yeah, for me, it's a little bit longer, thankfully.
Yep.
But the the noise in my brain about it
Yeah.
probably is still always there.
Yeah.
So even though I'm getting that little bit of relief, and I constantly then tell myself, "You're doing all right. You're doing all right," but there is that internal voice going on telling you that there's something wrong. So also at the time, the only real symptoms I had of being sick or whatever was my neck. Now at the time, I didn't realise that I had some issues going on with my neck. So I was getting tingling basically into my jaw here. I was getting some going into the chest area and going down to the back of my arm. So basically, well, that got a lot worse later on. But there was some issues going on that I didn't know about. And I actually had a prolapse disc in C6, C7. And the disc was actually compressing on my spinal cord and also the nerve that runs down, basically down the back of the tricep, into the front of the arm here and into these 3 fingers, which I still have numb fingers today. And I want to get into that as well because I'll come back to it, is because basically I had to have a disc replacement in my neck. And for someone that's got medical anxiety, knowing that you're going to put yourself in a hospital and you're going to be there for 2 weeks and rehab is something that is completely and utterly triggering that set me off on another whirlwind. But going back to what you were saying about the paramedics and going back to that time, you know, I was so thankful for everything that they did for me. And then obviously the hospital tried to help me as much as they could. But what people don't realise is for someone that's got medical anxiety, if you just say something like, "Oh, my hemoglobin levels were at 185," someone might go, "Oh, that's really high." Now, I don't really know if it's really high. I know it's 5 higher than it should be, but is 5 really extremely high? So the words that people use when they're talking to you about your medical situations or anything like that, they don't realise how triggering that they are, you know? So once I got the all clear from the hospital, we knew that I had an anxiety attack. One of the things that this doctor who told me that I had the illness told me that the COVID jabs would also cause my blood to thicken. So don't get them, right? And, you know, so that was a massive thing that played on me. So it was quite triggering through that whole time of COVID and everyone talking about them, it being such a big topic and trying to work out what you can and can't do. And just knowing that, you know, that it could affect my health even more because of this condition that this doctor told me I had. The hematologist, as I said, that I went to, he was absolutely amazing. We ran through so many different tests to work out whether or not I had this blood cancer. But the first thing I remember when he looked over my numbers, before I'd actually seen him in person, I did a video call because I had to do an array of more blood tests and everything like that before he could really diagnose anything anyway. So over the phone, he said, "Look, looking at your blood results, I don't personally think you have this blood cancer, just looking at it. But we're going to go through the testing and everything like that." So there was a little window of hope.
Just before we go on, how long was it when you had that conversation from your initial conversation? How long did you actually think that you had it because the doctor said that you may have it? How long did that play around for?
Well, look, probably all up 8 months.
Wow.
8 months. Even though he had said that, you know, in your mind you're still like, well, he's just looking over numbers and he's just being skeptical on the whole thing.
It's a long time.
So I think that was a big part of it for a long time. And as I said, when they drained the blood, there was a euphoric feeling. When I had the anxiety attack, it told me that I'm having a heart attack. And so I was getting these constant things that he was right. The first doctor was right. And the anxiety didn't go away. I probably wound up in hospital maybe 3 times having anxiety attacks, and they would come out of nowhere. And so I really, 8 months. And the hematologist was so good that he knew that I was struggling with anxiety. And so what he did was he actually kept me on his books a little bit longer and said, "We'll do another 6 months and then we'll retest again just to give you that extra little bit of confidence that you don't have this. And then I can discharge you from my care." and so, which is what we did. But yeah, it was 8 months that I basically thought that I had this blood cancer. Yeah.
It's a long time. I imagine within that 8 months, you've got people to tell what's going on, family, loved one, friends, all that sort of stuff. So that would have been a really hard time. When you're at hospital for that first time, that first anxiety attack that you had,
Yeah.
and the doctor's done all those tests on you, and then comes back and says, mate, you're just having an anxiety attack. Can you go back to that moment when that happened and what went through your head in terms of, like, I know for me, when I had my first one, I'm like, that doesn't happen to me. Like, that's never happened to me, blah, blah, blah. What was it like hearing that for the first time that, hey, this is just an anxiety attack?
You probably don't, like, for me, it wasn't an anxiety attack.
Mm.
You know, you can't comprehend it is because it felt like a heart attack.
Yeah.
And the fact that the doctor had told me that that's what's going to happen, that you don't say that, you know, like in your mind, you can't process that that's an anxiety attack, that it can be that bad.
Yeah.
Knowing now that it is an anxiety attack, and like, it's funny that you say that it can't happen to me, because I never thought anything like that could. And this is a big part of my message is that, you know, I never thought something like this could happen to me.
Yep.
And the anxiety as well. You know, like I grew up like be tough.
Yep.
You know, my dad was a very, very hard man, extremely hard.
Yep.
You know, I was taught not to even cry or show emotion. So to go from that to then, and one big thing with medical anxiety is you constantly seek reassurance from people around you. So you might be really struggling and I'll have to ask maybe 5 or 6 people of their opinion on something that's going on with my health. So I'm really begging for their approval on a situation.
Yeah. Reinforcement.
Yeah. And they can't really give it to me because they're not an expert. Yeah. You really need an expert to give you that reassurance.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's definitely it's an interesting thing to play around with your mind where you never thought this could happen to you and now it is. And how you deal with that as well, because that's also another part of it that you know.
It brings back, I've just had a memory. It's funny you should mention it because I've just come back from, I've just had a memory in my head when I first was going through my anxiety issues. I remember I was working for an IT company and my boss at the time had no idea how to deal with it. No one did, right? Because no one talked about it. And I remember I had time off because I was going for the first time I ever had an anxiety attack. Mine's a little bit different. It lasted about a month to maybe 6 weeks. So it's a little bit different. But I remember I finally got back to work. I filled up the courage, right? I'm going back. I'm doing this. First day back at work, I remember I had a nosebleed. Oh. Just started pissing out. Yeah, just pissing out blood. And I remember going up to him. I remember having tissues and said, hey, I'm going up to the hospital because I've got a nosebleed. Yeah. And I remember clear as day that he said to me, it's just a nosebleed, man. What are you doing? But in my mind, it's like, something bad is really happening to my body right now. And it's not to compare to you because someone has told you that you might have something that's really bad. Yeah. It's just me going through it for the first time and then having something as simple as a nosebleed, which if I had it now, I'd just, go and rinse it under water. But it does trigger those feelings. Your body's so heightened. That you're so in fight and flight mode that there's no rational thought that could... And like you say, like that guy just saying, oh, you know, don't worry about it, mate. It's just a nosebleed. But in your mind, when you're in that scenario, and I've had times where I have a tingle in my face or something, and my first thought is worst case scenario. There's never, you know, it's just nothing. It's just a whatever. It could be not. It is absolutely nothing. Yeah. But your first thought is always worst case scenario. Yep. It is.
And a lot of the times until you get checked out by a professional, you can't ease that thought. Yeah. You know?
Yeah, you can't. It's so hard. I don't know if this is a male thing. I really don't. But it's so hard hearing a doctor say, and this is only from my experience because yours is a little different, but it's so hard that a doctor says to you, hey, you've got anxiety, and you sit there going, anxiety? I've never had it. I don't know. Yeah. What are you talking about? You have to give up this. You have to give up this. You need a clean of this. You need this. And you're like, but they're all the things that enjoy doing. That's everything I've done for the last 30 years. I enjoy doing that stuff.
Yeah.
So to hear it, it's actually quite confronting, because you're like, oh shit, what does this actually mean?
Yeah.
But again, that's only drawn from my experience. It's nothing compared to what happened to you, because you're thinking you've got this.
So I think that's the
going
thing
on.
is the doctors, like, the anxiety was so downplayed because the bigger issue was this blood cancer.
Yeah.
And even though the doctor said, yeah, this is my...
Loves the camera. Loves the camera.
Yeah, every time
Just
I'm on
like a
camera,
dad, eh?
yeah, that's it. But, yeah, so basically, I guess the anxiety was always sort of pushed to the side a little bit and not seen by the GP as a big thing, because at the time we were tackling this other thing.
Yeah.
And so always the anxiety's been like, oh, it's just anxiety. And I guess up until recently, the GP that I was seeing was probably not the right fit. He wasn't really on board or emotionally sort of, what do you say, like, to deal with someone with anxiety. You know, he was just too cut off from it.
Yep.
And you need someone that's a little bit more nurturing in the situation and listening, because what you're saying isn't rational a lot of the time. You know, and I've studied anatomy, and I think that also makes it a little bit worse.
Yep.
The fact that I know the body so well, the systems, the organs, the muscles, the fibre, down to everything I've studied.
Yeah.
So, you know, knowing that is worse, because you then internally think about exactly what's going on. So it was definitely very hard to hear. And even after, you know, that whole time with the hematologist, and as I said, it was 8 months, plus then another extended 6 months. Once I got that result, you know, the norm would be to feel relief from that, saying that you don't have that. And a lot of people would probably just carry on with their lives as normal at that point. And unfortunately for myself, it wasn't the case. And the best way that I heard it explained, and that's why I said, when someone's, you know, doing a lot, running a business, and as I said, I'd started doing stand-up comedy, I'm really pushing myself and putting myself out there. It's basically like an elastic band. And then something's happened, and that elastic band then broken. And in that metaphor is quite interesting, because then the lacquer band's broken, right? But I've always been of the thought, well, how do I fix this lacquer band? I'm not just going to accept that the lacquer band's broken and that I'm going to have to stop doing what I want to do. Now, like you said, there are some changes that you need to make in your life. And when you have anxiety, it's very easy to drop things. Because the anxiety is the worst. So maybe giving up the drink a little bit, giving up the diet, all that sort of stuff. And I actually love really out there people's theories as well. I'm open to a lot of things. And I've gone down some really deep rabbit holes, because I'm a big fan of, like, alternative medicine alongside with Western medicine. But because I've been stuffed around by doctors a little bit, and it's not the first time as well. I've had doctors previously give me false things as well, which I'd never really thought about till years later. But there was a couple of little incidents that happened, and I'd completely forgotten about it. But it was triggering at the time, I remember. So, you know, it's been maybe 3 doctors that have really done it, and more recently the doctor that I had that had been dealing with all of this stuff as well, who I've now changed from, have people that have basically done wrong by me. So
you got zero confidence.
I got zero confidence in the medical industry. And there's some amazing doctors out there, and I know that there are, but I've had some experiences that make me think otherwise. And I've also done some alternative things. But so my main thing is that you need to, I knew I needed to get some help for myself. So the first thing I did was book into a psychologist, which I still work with. I think it's a big part of medicine. But then I started doing extreme things like ice baths, meditation. I looked into Wim Hof, so I was doing his breathing techniques. And I wanted to find different ways, because as I said, I wouldn't just accept the fact that I have this and that I have to give up things, you know. And one of the biggest things is, I believe, and the reason why when we met and the message that I'm trying to deliver, and the reason that I tell so many people that I have anxiety also is because doing stand-up comedy, most people say that they would rather death than public speaking. They'd rather die.
Yep.
To get up in front of people and talk is one thing, but to get up in front of people and try and make them laugh, they've got to think what you've thought up, what you've constructed is funny.
Yep.
And you've got to do it for a certain amount of time. You know you're going to be on stage for a certain amount of time. And I want to promote that even though I have anxiety, and I've had times that I've been so riddled that I'm curled up on my floor in the fetal position, but I know that I've got a show that night. And I know that I've got to do whatever it takes to get on that show.
Yep.
I've had people come and pick me up to drive me just so that I get there.
Yep.
And I will not let anything stand in front of the fact that I want to be a professional stand-up comedian, and nothing will stop me. And that's why I'll also go down the alternative routes and look at anything that I can, because I'll look for any edge up on what I can to help my health.
Yep. Yeah, no, it's a good point. It's a good point. I support it 100%. Since doing or starting Beyond the Banter, there's been a lot of interesting methods that have come across our table. We've had conversations with people, I'm a strong believer as well in give everything a go, give it a try. But I think the key part to it all is you've got to have an open mind with it all, and you have to accept that you do have anxiety or you do have this mental health condition that unless you try and do something about it, it's never going to go away.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go back a little bit. I know we touched on comedy there for a second there, but I want to say that to sort of a little bit later on. Toasty's having an absolute ball. You're stealing the show. You've had your checks. 6 months has passed. You're all clear from, I can't say the word, you can say it.
Polycythemia?
No. Hematologist?
The hematologist?
Hematologist. It's all clear.
All clear.
You now know that you've got anxiety.
Correct.
What happens from that moment on?
So...
I should say, you dropped the doctor that potentially led you down this, lead you down this rabbit hole. You make changes, obviously.
So
there.
he was just a sports doctor that I'd gone for the PRP injections.
Yep.
So there was no long-term, ongoing need to see that guy. The fact that you put it like that is now you know you've got anxiety.
Yep.
I guess that's not something that I've ever stopped and pondered on.
Yep.
I probably never stopped long enough to really sit there and go, this is just anxiety.
Yeah.
Well, because when you say just anxiety, from the blood cancer, but it's not something that I've ever stopped to look at in a sense of this is that, and now how do I feel about it? And maybe I probably should do that. Maybe I should stop and actually spend a little bit of time thinking about that and seeing how that feels within myself.
Mm-hmm.
But the constant thing that I've just done is research ways on how I can better myself, because as you said before, the jokes haven't stopped today. I like to make everyone laugh. So if it's going into a cafe, if it's going into a shop, I try and make the people in the shop happy. I want them to go, the best part of my day was Nick coming in.
Here comes Nick, yeah.
And that's what I want with everyone around me.
Yep.
But
I've seen it today.
In saying that, I reckon at least 30 times I've gone through a complete body scan to check whether I'm dying or not.
Yeah.
So although there's this, this exterior that we try and create internally with my medical anxiety, it's constantly there. And I hurt my neck yesterday as I have had the surgery now, which we'll get a little bit more into because I think there's some funny points in that as well.
Yeah.
But I actually overdid a little bit yesterday and the neck's really flared up.
Yeah.
So there's been a lot of the times that neck then relates to my medical anxiety because that was the only symptoms I had at the time when he told me that I was sick. Was the neck issue.
Yep.
So anytime this flares up, it just triggers straight back to the heart attack. And so that's what I think that I'm having. So one thing that I want to touch on is when you feel like you're at your fittest and a doctor tells you that you've got this blood cancer that may kill you, you lose all confidence in your body's ability to feel good about yourself or to know what healthy feels like. And I would assume that I'm a reasonably healthy person. I don't eat a lot of junk food. I don't drink any soft drink or anything like that. I try and drink as much water as I can. Even the fact that I'm drinking it out of a plastic bottle annoys me because I try and do everything to a T health-wise. I also work with a guy who's in Sydney. He's Mick the Podman, who makes these nutrient-dense pods. I've had my DNA tested, my gut microbiome tested. I do everything I can to try and feel the fittest. But unfortunately, even in doing all of that, there's still that internal talk, that chatter of telling you that you're not well.
Where does it end? It will never end, right? It will never end because there's always a test that you can go and do to check on something. Or
so I believe it can end. I mean, I won't give up on that. And even with, the neck now, like I saw an occupational therapist yesterday and he's like, that nerve might never come back. I won't let that be a thing. It will come back. And I will find a way to find peace in my mind. I'm sure of it. Because the way I'm living now is no way to live. And I think the same way, so instead of that elastic band, to me, there was a switch. And that switch was turned off of feeling good within myself. I've just got to get to the point where I can turn that switch back on. And I believe I'm going down some of the right paths. I even think being a part of Beyond the Banter and being able to share other people's stories as well and listen to them and really get down to the bottom of it will help me as well. And so this
even just talking about it.
Exactly.
Like doing this right now. You might not you might not see it now, but it's a big part of the process.
Definitely.
Look, it's a lot of information that you've had a lot happen to you, but it doesn't end there.
No.
So let's go to the next stage.
Okay.
Let's go to the next step because this elevates it again.
That's right.
Thanks for tuning in to Beyond the Banter. That was part 1 with Nick Trapani. Stay tuned because part 2 is coming soon.